Friends, welcome again to this different kind of Sunday as we kick off 2019 together with our Epiphany feast. You having a good time? You having a good time? Yes? Awesome. I'm coming to you not so live, but via video for a quick sermon moment, and coming in video to keep things easier for my brain in the midst of my recovery from post-concussion syndrome. I keep making steady, slow progress and wanted to let this Sunday be a Sunday that I could hopefully be present at Salt House, kind of be there to talk with you, popping in and out of worship as I'm able to, without having to be up front at all. It's kind of giving my brain that break. So that was the plan for this Sunday, hence video. Here we are. So let's do this. It's Epiphany. Epiphany is January 6th today, the 12th day of Christmas. It's the feast day that Christians have long set aside as honoring the day the Magi show up on the scene with Jesus. And we've just heard that story of the Magi, the wise men, the wise guys. But let's talk a bit about them. What do we know about these guys? I'll tell you that there's much that we think we know about them that is not actually there in the original text. It's been added over the years to the story. So again, I want to ask, if we actually look at the text, like, what do we really know about these guys? How many of them were there? Well, the text doesn't actually say. There were 3 gifts. I think that's why we assume that there were 3 of them, but the text doesn't actually say how many people there actually were. Nowhere does it say that they were kings, despite the popular hymn that we like to sing about them. Even the word magi, like magic, it associates them as sorcerers of some kind. That isn't really accurate either. They were scholars who studied, who knew the ancient texts. They were astrologers. They looked for signs of God in the moon and the stars. The text says that they were from the east, which means that they were foreigners, considered outside the bounds of God's people, which shows us from the very beginning that the message of Jesus, the story of God, has always been intended for all people, and we mean all people. And if you were here on Christmas Eve, that's part of what we named together, right? That Jesus' birth is packed with these exclamation points, that the divine has chosen its hiding place in the world, and that place is in all material things, even here, right? In these men considered outside the expected bounds of where God could be, even here, written in the light of the stars, in all things. All things are part of God's story. All bear the light of God. So the Magi, they have come following a star. And guess what? They didn't show up on the night of Jesus' birth at the manger, despite most nativity scenes that we see. But from what we can tell, the star appeared the night of Jesus' birth, and that's when their journey began. They met Jesus probably when he was closer to 2 years old. So is some of this new information for you, maybe reorienting a little bit what you know about the Magi? So whether you personally believe the details as historically accurate or not, there is deep truth and meaning in this as we consider how the Magi set out following the light, seeing God in the signs around them. And so we're going to choose to use their story on this Epiphany to begin our journey down the road for us here at Salt House as we begin 2019 as a community together. So today we begin the Epiphany season. It's not just one Sunday, but it stretches from now until the beginning of Lent, that season, which is the beginning of March. So to talk about where we're heading together, first let's remember where we have been. We spent our Advent season on the road of detours, right? Naming how life doesn't go the way we are told that it's going to go, but it's full of unexpected twists and turns, detour after detour. And on Christmas Eve, we name that our God is there on the road, finding us not as we're supposed to be, but finding us as we really are, even here, in the midst of the detours of our lives, because God is in all things, even here. So continuing then our journey into Epiphany, we're going to be mindful of this, keep holding all of this with us as we'll practice together being people like the Magi who look for and participate in the love and the light of God that is in all things, even in our detours, even in us. So our series then, where we're headed, is a journey into prayer. You've already had a chance at your tables to begin some of that conversation around prayer. I hope that you've let your curiosity already get stirred up around prayer, because I will tell you that y'all have a lot of questions about prayer. It's one of the themes that I've heard over and over again over the last year in my conversations that I've had with folks within our community. And what I've heard is that we have assumptions about what prayer is, but some of that just isn't working for us anymore. So we're wondering, what can prayer look like? What can prayer be like, especially for those of us who are post-evangelical or who come from other faith traditions or from no faith tradition at all, or maybe just grew up with a prescribed way of praying, like it looks like this is how you do it. I hear us hungering for a language and practice of prayer that resonates with the light and love that we know to be at the heart of the Jesus story, and that which is here with us, hidden in us and in everything. That's why we're making time for this conversation, for prayer. Also, because as we begin this new year, this is a time when our government has been partially shut down, when the lines between us and them seem fiercer than ever, where we find ourselves in our world's darkness, not to mention our own experiences of darkness and Detours Tour. I know I need help looking for the light in my own slow, unknown recovery from a brain injury. So we turn to this conversation around prayer with some urgency too, because prayer is a practice that can change us on the road. Whatever detour we're each living through, whatever we're staring down in 2019, which may be a shift for us in our thinking to say that prayer can be what changes us. Prayer isn't about trying to change God's mind. I think that's how it's talked about sometimes, right? That perception of, well, if enough of us pray, then God will surely do something. And the word prayer does come from the Latin precari, which means to beg. But that's not the full picture of prayer. The Hebrew word for prayer is tefillah, from the root palel, which means to reflect upon or evaluate oneself. To reflect upon or evaluate oneself. Prayer, to reflect upon oneself. Maybe prayer starts there, starts here. So in this sermon series, on this road and this journey of prayer, that's where we start, but we're not going to look to nail down one description or definition or way of praying, but to break the boundaries, to include all of what prayer can be, to explore what's possible. So that means in the weeks to come, we'll have experiences of prayer on these Sundays. We'll hear voices from within our own community here at Sawhouse. We'll hear from other teachers and pastors. We'll learn and experience Islamic prayer, as well as Jewish prayer and blessings, which is actually where we'll head next week, next Sunday, as a dear rabbi friend of our own, Gila Fines. He'll come, Rabbi Ted Falcon, to speak about that. Through all of this, we'll let our questions lead us into what prayer can be. Do you have questions? I know I do. And are you excited for where this journey might take us? I know I am. It's time for this conversation. So as we begin this journey, I invite us to literally carry one thing with us as we begin. So this week, I was at home working on my sermon. I was in my bathrobe, and I put my hands into my pockets. This isn't my bathrobe, but I was wearing my bathrobe. I put my hands into my pockets, where I found this, a glow-in-the-dark plastic star that had fallen from our daughter's ceiling months ago, but it just kind of found a new home in my robe pocket. There it had stayed. So on Wednesday morning, I'm sitting there holding this glowing star as I prayerfully listen for God, writing a sermon about stars and light. I mean, come on, right? It was very funny. So I invite you to take home with you today one of the glow-in-the-dark stars that's there at the center of your table, and put it in your robe pocket at home, or attach it to your ceiling for when you go to bed at night. Put it on your bedroom ceiling, or the wall in your bathroom, or put it on the dashboard of your car, just anywhere where you'll keep stumbling upon it this week and let it be a touchstone for these weeks to come. So Wednesday night, kind of after I discovered that star, we went to bed, and I realized that we had actually attached another one of these stars just to our bedroom wall. And I love that it has, in these past few nights, as I see it, it's become something that has new meaning for me. I love that. So this week, maybe let your star remind you of the Magi and be a reminder of prayer, to see how light and prayer are wound together somehow. A star that led the Magi, a star inviting us into prayer, opening up to that same light that is there in us. This is the time of year to ask these questions of prayer, of light. The Epiphany season is known as a season of light, the light of Christ shining into the darkness of our world. So in this dark time of year, we look for the light. We notice how even in the dreary, gray darkness, that is January in the Pacific Northwest, even here, the light grows every day, even here. As the light grows, then, we ask, could it be that prayer requires us to deepen our own awareness, not God's? Could prayer be how we actively hope for change in us, not in God? Could prayer be what the Magi were doing as they followed that star? Could prayer awaken us to the light, lead us as the star of God, leading us inward and outward and into 2019? These are Epiphany questions. Questions that the Magi brought to the manger along with their gifts. Questions we dare to explore vulnerably together. Friends, we begin a season of prayer now to reflect upon ourselves for the sake of opening up into the light that is in us and in all things. Amen? Amen. So now we're going to do just that. So I invite you to take a deep breath, to kind of resettle, to feel your feet on this floor as we take time now to sing and to pray together.